Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another Setbacks in Medicine discussion. My name is Madalena, or Maddie, you can call me either, and I'll be facilitating. So just as a summary for those who maybe are joining for the first time, so in the Setbacks in Medicine series, we come together to share stories of mistakes and setbacks in medicine, and also what helped us move through and persevere through these setbacks. And today we have three wonderful humans at different stages of training who are here to share their stories of their experiences, all related to a theme of am I cut out for this, which is one I think everyone can relate to. So I think, without further ado, we'll just jump into introductions. So Mohit, maybe we'll start with you, and maybe you could introduce yourself, share something about yourself, and would love to hear, in your opinion, why you think it's important to talk about mistakes and setbacks in medicine.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maddie. Hi, everyone. My name is Mohit Harsh. I am a current hospitalist in a community hospital outside of St. Louis, Missouri in the US. I just finished training, so I'm on kind of the tail end of the spectrum, the oldest maybe, who knows, but definitely not the wisest. I finished residency in internal medicine at Washington University in St. Louis, and then stayed on for another year as a chief resident, which I just completed this past June. Why I think this is important, I think, especially if you were chiming in now, you are all probably pretty well adept to social media, to Twitter, to whatever it is that people use to publicize their strengths and their weaknesses, but primarily their strengths. I think we often hear all the time, I did this exceptional thing, praise be to me, but we don't often talk about where the ladders were that they had to climb to get to that point. And sometimes those stories are actually much more powerful because they can enlighten us on, oh, if we want to get to that next stage, what kind of hurdles could we expect, or also how do we persevere through those. So for me, I think it's always been helpful to have like near peer discussions with friends, with colleagues, close mentors on, what are the hurdles that happened and how do we go through them. So that's why I think it's important.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. And I think we can all relate to the experience that on social media in a lot of different ways, it often focuses on people's strengths, and I think it makes everyone who inevitably goes through mistakes and setbacks, it makes us feel alone, because it makes us feel like, we're maybe the only ones going through this, even though that's not the case. So thank you for articulating that. And next we'll jump to Lauren. Lauren, again, I would love for you to introduce yourself and, in your opinion, why you think it's valuable to have these discussions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren. I use she, her pronouns, and I am currently a first-year pediatrics resident at UCSF, born and raised in the DC area. Other things, let's see. I'm the immediate past president of the American Medical Women's Association Student Division. And I'm also a cellist. Why is it important to talk about setbacks? I think like there's a culture of silence around struggle and failure in medicine. And it's like been really important to me personally to kind of normalize it and like share, because once you share, other people feel willing to share as well. And we all are struggling at one time or another. This like path and career is like very strenuous and stressful at times. And so I think the more we can kind of share what we are experiencing and talk about it openly, the easier it can be.
I completely agree. And Lauren, thank you for being here, and thank you for helping to kind of normalize talking about mistakes and setbacks. So our other guest who will be sharing a story is Arnie, and Arnie is actually a close friend of mine. She is in my medical school class. We're now at different years, but Arnie is just a wonderful person, and I'm so grateful that she's here. So Arnie, if you can share something about yourself, and also why do you think it's important to have conversations about mistakes and setbacks?
Okay, thank you so much, Maddie. Yeah, no, Maddie's the best. And I gotta say, you've been doing such a wonderful job creating these like really inclusive, safe, comfortable spaces for us. And you have such a calming voice and just a really amazing presence. I could go on about you forever. So, okay, so who I am, right. So 4th-year medical student, I'm applying into psychiatry, Psych Match 2023, and originally from the Bay Area. Finding my feet gradually as a New Yorker. I am neutral towards seasons. I like my climates around a mild 70 degrees year round. So this might not be the region for me, but the bagels here are indeed excellent. I I enjoy exploring the city when I can. I really enjoy, I don't know, staying in touch with like family and friends, phone, long rambling text messages, voicemails, etc. And something I've recently been enjoying is watching Never Have I Ever, Mindy Kaling's show centered around the antics of a very frustrating but heartwarming Desi teenager. The actress is played by a young Sri Lankan. I love the show too. Just saw a comment from Nikita. The actress is played by Maitreyi Ramakrishnan, who's like a young Sri Lankan Tamil girl in Toronto. So like I'm also a Tamil girl from Sri Lanka, and so that show's been very special to me for a lot of reasons. Yeah, I agree. The show was very bingeable in 3 days from Mohit. So why I think setbacks are so important, I think everyone's really talked about them. Everyone's talked about them. Things everyone has brought up about setbacks, I agree with them wholeheartedly. I think that in medicine, even though I think medicine is a weird place where even though we're all navigating like a very unique and very similar path in a lot of ways, like we're all on this kind of this it's not a sinking ship. It's a ship that definitely needs some repairs for sure, but like we're all on this very kind of difficult journey together, right? But even though we're all doing very similar things, like we're all taking very similar classes, taking the same board exams, the same like universal hurdles, it's so easy to feel so alone, even though you're going through very similar things as other people. Like you feel so alone, like even amongst like my classmates and stuff, I've noticed that like I've never felt more alone than I have in medical school at times, even though it's the first time in my life where I'm doing literally the same thing almost as everyone around me. So I think talking about setbacks is really important because we feel most alone, I think, when we have perceived failures and when it feels like we're struggling. And so in order to kind of take away those feelings of loneliness and make sure that we remind each other that we are in community with one another, even though this path that we're on has the very strong ability to make us feel like we're isolated. We got to just keep doing what we can to remind each other that we're here for each other. So I think, sorry, I tried to be concise, Maddie, but that was like my long-winded answer for why I think setbacks are important.
That was spot on. I feel everything you're feeling. So thank you for saying it in that way. And Arnie, thank you for being here. And Lauren and Mohit, thank you for being here. So as I said, the theme for this discussion is, am I cut out for this? Which you have all alluded to is a question that I think we all maybe ask ourselves or at least reflect on at some point throughout this journey. So I'm really happy that you all are here to normalize talking about this question. And before we jump into the stories, I wanted to let everyone here know that while these 3 amazing individuals will be sharing stories, it is an open conversation. So please put your thoughts in the chat, unmute. We can all learn from each other's reflections and stories. So just wanted to let everyone know that it's an open conversation. So with that, let's dive in. And Mohit, if it's okay, maybe we can start with you. And what story comes to mind for you when you hear, am I cut out for this?
Too many stories. I will just start out by saying that I think at every stage in training, we can feel this way. And I don't think that there's this magic number or magic point in your career will you stop feeling this way. So I just transitioned to an attending role in a new hospital. And on day 1, day 2, day 5, I was still feeling like, am I cut out for this? my training set me up for success right now? Oh my gosh, I have so much more to learn. So it's a constant feeling, but I think harnessing that feeling into a growth mindset is the key. Um, so a story that comes out that has still very much been ingrained in my head, um, is from around this time, my intern year. I started on the inpatient medicine ward. So I finished internal medicine training. And my med school, to give background, was a very small med school. Was one of those hospitals that wasn't a tertiary care referral center. We didn't have inpatient transplants. We didn't have a lot of subspecialists. So we would have to actually transfer a lot of patients out. So with that, there were a number of conditions I had never really even been exposed to. Coming then to a place where I trained, like WashU, where it's the exact opposite. Everyone is being transferred into our hospital for care. That first month on the inpatient wards, I was exposed to so many complex patients that I just had no real bearing of how to manage, let alone even just discuss patient care about. So the story really goes into one of the first call days we had. It was very busy. I'm learning the EMR, I'm learning the hospital. I'm very slow, as everyone is in the initial stages of intern year. And we finish call day like pretty late into the night. We leave, we come back in the morning, we're going to staff all the new patients. And I had this new patient that had HIV, also had a history of a liver transplant, and was very ill, had elevations in their liver chemistries, and was septic. And I was way over my head. Didn't know where to even begin in the story. The patient was so complex with their past medical history. When I started presenting, I was already a bit sleep deprived because we were staying late the night before. So my presentation was all over the place. The standard, give the HPI, then the past medical, then the social and surgical and physical exam. I skipped around so much that I even myself didn't know what I was saying. So halfway through the presentation, my attending stopped me and was like, you're sharing like the physical exam and the labs while you're telling me about what brought them in the hospital. Let me write out for you how you should present. And like, I have to push through and try and present and hold back like the tear that's coming from my eye, thinking that I thought I was good enough to be, selected to this residency program. I'm now proving that I'm not. I just got here on a luck. And then later on in the week, I was discharging a patient, and same way, I like felt kind of overwhelmed. It was a long, prolonged hospital course, and I didn't really know how to summarize it eloquently. And then the following day, my attending stopped me, pulled me aside, and said, like, you have to redo this discharge summary. Let me show you how you write a discharge summary. And those two moments really stand out, because it made me feel like up until this point, I just didn't learn anything. Up until this point, what was I doing in med school? All those hours and hours of studying culminated in me being told I can't even just present a patient, something that I've been doing for 2 years straight in clerkships. So that took the entire month of that inpatient ward experience to kind of get over or recognize that I'm not there, but I'm not there yet. And I think that yet is the key theme that I want everyone to think about, that we are not a binary person when it comes to our skill set. Our skill sets can be developed over time. That's why you're in residency training. That's why you're in medical school, to learn. And the key thing also to keep in mind is that I came from a very, very different background in medical school. I had never been exposed to a patient with a liver transplant. I didn't even know where to begin with how far back do I need to look in their history? How far back do I need to look in their liver chemistries to know the pattern of what's presenting today? And it's not necessarily any fault to me. It's not any necessarily fault to my medical school. It is just different layers of training. And in a way, I had to reflect back and saying, well, this is why I actually wanted to come to this institution, to get exposed to patients like this. This is actually why I wanted to be here, to get pushed out of my comfort zone. I could go on, but I want to save plenty more time for people to chat, and Lauren and Arnie to share their stories. But there's a lot to unpack there, but that's the first one that comes to mind.
Yeah, Mohit, thank you for sharing that. I think what really hit me is when you like transformed this really difficult kind of two encounters that you just highlighted that I know are so universal. I think everyone has been in some type of situation like that where you feel like, you feel like you should have known something and that didn't come out in that way. But what really stood out to me is the mindset that you just illustrated of harnessing that into a growth mindset. And as in your words, like, I'm not there yet. Like, you will get there, and you will, get to that point. And just turning that into a growth mindset was really powerful for me to hear. I would love to hear Lauren and Arnie's thoughts, but I also wanted to ask you, like, what helped you kind of get to that mindset? Because I imagine in the moment it's not easy to do that. It's kind of just hits you in the chest, and you're like, oh my God. But like, how did you get through that?
Yeah, I think, and I'll be honest, like, that mindset didn't come easy, nor did it come quickly. It was something that I still had this, deep sensation of, I'm not cut out for this, or I'm not worthy of this like residency position, throughout that entire rotation. So what really changed was conversations similar to this with my co-interns. I luckily had a fantastic co-intern who had gone to medical school where we are training for residency. So was like very familiar with the attendings, very familiar with the patient population and like the complex pathology that we felt. And so just hearing from her, talking to her about, her exact same stories of where she was as I was, maybe a couple of years before in her clerkships, but she went through the exact same process, maybe during third year or fourth year, but she went through the same process and made it through, and we're in the same position that we're in now together. So I think that was really helpful. And then the other thing that was also helpful was just being open and honest with people. I think Arnie shared it really well, that you can feel very lonely in this process, especially when you either don't have people to share your stories with, or have the open, safe environment to share your stories. Like I said, people are very quick to share their own personal successes, but you have to have at least one person or a small group that you can be open, be somewhat vulnerable about these stories, to learn that I'm not alone in this, and that we can work together to then move to the next step.
Thank you. Yeah. Lauren, Arnie, any reflections on this, or what's going through your mind?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that story, Mohit. I think it's really hard. You go through medical school, you fight all this imposter syndrome, right? Like, you get to residency and you're like, all right, cool, I'm a doctor now. And then like, you want to impress, you want to do so well. And I feel like that feeling of like wanting to show up as your best self and to have other people perceive the amount of effort and care that you are putting into what you're doing is so like, that's such a common theme for all of us. And I can only imagine how hard it was and how heartbreaking it was, like the feeling of just fighting back tears when you're getting like feedback or like criticism to do something better. Like I've felt that too on rotations, and it's really hard to remain composed in that moment, and it's also hard to not perseverate and fixate on it for so long afterwards. So thank you so much for sharing that story for us and for reminding us that right, we're never going to be like a finished product. Like even when we're like we have the title doctor, like we're still learning things, and that it's okay, and that that we're not alone in that. So thank you so much. I had an experience like that just recently on a rotation I really cared about, and it sucked. So thank you.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. I've had that situation happen in med school and in residency so far. And I think like, um, yeah, just being open to like talking to my co-interns about the situation was helpful. I actually have had to like just remind attendings like we're only 3 months into residency, so like there's a lot of things we don't know how to do. So like your expectation that I automatically know this is like not, I can't meet that expectation because I don't. I haven't even ever used Epic before, so I'm still getting used to using this EMR, let alone knowing how to put that order in and call that person. And but I think like we do kind of have this expectation of ourselves that we can pick things up quickly and adjust to all of the changes that happen in residency so quickly. And that expectation is unrealistic. And yes, I agree with the chat message. Epic is I find Epic very confusing. There's like a million ways to do one thing and also not many ways to do some other things.
No, Lauren, Arnie, thank you for sharing your reflections, and Mohit. That was a really powerful story that I know a lot of people can relate to. So thank you for sharing that. Lauren, I would love to transition to your story if that's all right. And, you know, again, what story comes to mind when you hear that phrase, am I cut out for this?
Yeah, I was very lucky to grow up in a family that just supported me to do whatever I wanted to do. And so I don't think I really had thoughts about, can I be a doctor? Can I make it in the field until I got to medical school? I'm obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but I'm a Black American, like in a field where there are not many, the majority of people don't look like me. So that was a thought I had kind of immediately, like, is this the right place for me? And then in my first year of medical school, I had a really hard time with immunology, the class, and got like extra tutoring and like went to office hours and stuff. And it just ended up not being enough. I failed the class by less than 1%. And at that institution, you have to repeat the entire year if you fail a class. And so when they told me I was going to have to repeat the entire year and like pay for it, I definitely was like, is this really what I want to do? Am I even able to do it if this is going to be the major, like if this is going to be the response to something so small? And I also had the experience of people telling me kind of that like I wasn't cut out for it, or maybe since I didn't do well in this class, that meant that I was not going to be able to be a doctor. And having things like that said to me by faculty or classmates really kind of became ingrained in my brain. I kind of like took that in and took it on as my own, which I wish I hadn't done, because it definitely has caused me to like second guess myself on tests, in clinical decision making, like every part of medical school. After that, I was like, well, maybe I'm not doing this right. Maybe I can't do this, where I didn't have that experience before. But it made me feel like I'm not smart enough, efficient enough, like, maybe, yeah, is this something that I can do? Not only like, am I able to understand the material and use it, but also like mentally, like emotionally, am I cut out for this rigorous career field? And so the one good thing I would say about having to repeat my first year was that deciding if I was actually going to repeat it made me really take a hard look at like, do I want to be a doctor? If I want to be a doctor, then I'm gonna have to repeat and go through this school and then just get out of there and go and do something, go somewhere else to do my training, or do I like pieces of what doctors do that maybe I could do in as a different type of, in a different career field? And other things I thought about were like, if I could go to a different medical school, would I still want to be in medical school? And so having that conversation with like a trusted mentor is kind of what allowed me to stay. It was very challenging emotionally to stay at that institution, knowing that I was not going to be able to, knowing that my goal was to be a doctor and that I wanted to be a doctor. And this is the only way that, it's not the only way, but like the alternative pathway was just highly unlikely to be successful. Just in this country, like you can't transfer medical schools until after you've taken step one. And I took step one in February of 2020. So I was not transferring anywhere when COVID hit. I would say it's definitely a question I've asked myself a lot, but that was a major sticking point in this career path of, am I actually able to do this or not? But it definitely helped having mentors that I could talk through everything that I was thinking and come to a decision.
Yeah, Lauren, I think thank you for sharing that. I think what's standing out to me is it's one thing to have the self-doubt that like, am I going to be able to do this? And then when you have someone who tells you that they're questioning your ability is just so many words, like disrespectful, just, not helpful in any way. And I think you showed how you persevered through that. And what I'm really interested in is when someone is kind of says that so harshly, to you, like saying that they're questioning your ability to do this. How did you find the strength to not let that be ingrained in you and to, push forward and come to the realization that this is important to you, this is what you want to do with your life, you want to finish this training? Like, how did you not let that get ingrained?
Yeah, I would say it did I'd say unfortunately it did, but checking in with people that I guess that I trust who have an outside, I guess I trust their opinion. And asking them, like checking in with them, like, is this actually true? Like, do you also think this is true? Because, you are also like a physician who is working here and also works with medical students, and you've seen what I can do. Like, do you also believe this? As opposed to hearing that from just someone who doesn't know me personally, I guess, and only sees like the numbers on the page, was kind of what allowed me to keep going, even though I was second guessing everything and thinking that I also probably wasn't able to do it. And then family just reminding me, like, you wanted to be a doctor when you were 4. So like, it's not like it's okay to change your mind if you think that you want to do something else, but this is also something that you've spent a lot of time and energy trying to pursue. So think about like how often you thought you wanted to be a doctor and all of the different things you wanted to do. And it's okay if you decide you don't want to be a doctor, but also remember that you've wanted to be one for so long. So I think, the biggest thing was like checking in with people that I trust to see if they also thought the same thing. And they didn't. So it helped.
Mohit, Arnie, any like reflections on this or similar experiences?
Arnie, please go.
Okay, Lauren, thank you so much for sharing that story. And I know I haven't met you before this call, but am I allowed to say, like, I'm just so proud. Like I'm so proud of you. Like it's really hard to go through something like that and to have conquered all those voices. And you are such a needed voice. You are going to be like, your presence in pediatrics is going to inspire so many people. And I don't know, I'm just really full of awe for how you really conquered all those kind of outside voices telling you something that was opposed to this truth that you've known since you were 4. And I think it takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of strength and just endurance to go back to your inner truth when it feels like outside things in the outside world are, you know, running contrary to that. I have nothing but admiration for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all face these moments where we have internal doubts, but it is like exponentially harder when then there is an external figure that is then doubting your abilities, which then compounds your own internal doubts, which creates this vicious cycle. So getting past that cycle, and like you said, Maddie, persevering through to this point, really, I think, speaks to then your desire, your passion, your value of, you know, finishing this path, becoming a physician, taking care of patients. And I can empathize honestly with a lot of with this, not not because I went through and had to retake a class or retake a year, but when I applied to medical school, I had terrible pre-med grades. Like I was told by pre-med advisors left and right, like you shouldn't apply. You're not going to get in. It's going to be a waste of funding, a waste of a year. And I took that to heart because I didn't know any better. And so I took a year, did research, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm not applying to med school. Maybe I'll apply this year and see. And similarly, like from the supportive family and trusted friends, ended up applying. And out of however many applications I sent out at that point, I got 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 interviews until I finally got one interview. And thankfully, that one interview out of the entire place ended up accepting me. So I always keep that in the back of my mind that, you know, I only had one opportunity to become a physician in the time frame that I did. Maybe I would have been one after, but I had so many other doubts, so many other voices telling me otherwise, and myself included, thinking that okay, like you were saying, maybe there's some aspects of medicine that I can do in a different career path. I don't need to be a physician, but always remembering at the core what is important. So thank you, Lauren. I think for everyone on the group, I feel like Maddie said, we want you all to chime in as well and ask your questions or share your viewpoints or stories as well.
Yeah, just going off of what Mohit just said, Gabriella just put a really powerful comment in the chat. Gabriella, are you in a place where you can unmute or would like to unmute to share what you put in the chat?
Sure. I'm at a cafe right now. Lauren was kind of talking a struggle on feeling like if you fit and reminded me of, you know, it's actually,
A little bit.
oh, can you hear me?
That's a little bit better, yeah.
Oh, okay. So it just reminded me of some advice my brother gave me when I was in medicine. Essentially, you want to stop, want to be a doctor or stop. And it's the second we can figure that out. And I always kept that with me. It's like never felt like I didn't want to be a doctor. I just felt like often like, oh, am I good enough? Like,
Yeah, no, Gabriella, thank you for unmuting. It was a little bit broken up, so I just want to summarize, just to make sure everyone can hear the wisdom that you shared. But you were saying that your brother once told you when you were thinking of putting medicine, do you want to stop because you no longer want to be a doctor, or do you want to stop because you feel like you aren't good enough to do it? And if it's the second, we just need to figure out how you can get better. And I think that's just a really beautiful advice. And thank you for your meeting. I just wanted to summarize so that everyone could hear that wisdom. So thank you.
I was just going to add that that's like basically the same conversation I had, because it really is like, unfortunately, medical education, it was not created really to support people that need like any kind of support at all, any kind of help. Like if you need academic help, if you need like emotional help, like it's just not set up for people that need any kind of support, which is the majority of people. Most people will need some help with something at some point. And there's not like a general culture of like let's support you to reach this goal. It's like, well, you've gotten here, so you must know how to do it. So you shouldn't need any additional support, which doesn't really make sense when it's not similar to any other situation in life. Yeah, just want to add that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what you all have touched on is sometimes the courage it takes to ask for help, even though it shouldn't take that much courage to have to ask for help, but it often does. And I think you all have illustrated just how, whether it's family or important mentors, that it's been really helpful for you guys to go to those people to get you the support that you need. Arnie, would love to transition to you, my friend. And what story comes to mind for you with that phrase, am I cut out for this?
Okay. Thanks again, Lauren and Mohit and Maddie. It's been, I'm learning so much, and this has been a really, really quality Sunday afternoon. So when I think of the theme of am I cut out for this, I think one of the things, a lot of moments during med school, but my third year OB-GYN rotation comes to mind because, so, we were fresh off of our first trimester grades. You get your grades back, and, you feel like, at least for me, when I got my grades back, there were good, there was like great feedback, and then there were, constructive things to worry about, or not worry about, but there was like constructive feedback throughout the course. Like basically after the course of your first rotation, I feel like I was a lot more anxious during my second trimester than I was during my first trimester, because going into my second trimester, all the kind of feedback and like your grades of the first trimester are kind of like they weighed on me a bit, and even though I thought of myself as someone who, is pretty outgoing, really loves getting to know patients, really loves getting to know the team and stuff, I felt a little bit self-conscious about like my shelf grade from the course. I felt a little bit self-conscious about, a piece of feedback that I'd gotten was, working on situational awareness and like knowing how to kind of modulate, like, you like different situations, like high enthusiasm is not necessarily like warranted in in all instances. For example, when you're in an OR, you shouldn't really try to make your presence known in an OR, right? So for those of you going into surgery and stuff, depends. But like, like these are all very good things that I learned. But the point is, so going into my OB-GYN rotation, I was very heightened. I was very my self-awareness and my anxiety around how I was being perceived was very heightened. And OB-GYN was just a really tough time for me. I was at a hospital where, there was great teaching staff. The residents and the faculty were really passionate about teaching, but I had just come off a week of night shifts, and it was really difficult for me to stay awake and be nocturnal, especially because as medical students, you're not really fully nocturnal, right? You have your didactics and presentations during the day. You still got to show up for your night shift. And, I was having a really hard time with just keeping up with the physical stamina that it takes to be in OB-GYN. And I was feeling really just self-conscious of every single micro interaction I was having with people. Third year, the way I described third year for me, at least, was I had never, until this year, I didn't realize what it meant to feel simultaneously insignificant, but also constantly scrutinized. Was just a very weird experience of being a third year medical student. And I felt that a lot on OB-GYN, and so I would have a lot of moments where I was just, you're kind of just waiting. You're like waiting for someone to go into labor. You're like waiting for something to happen. You can't really go escape anywhere. There's no like little break room for you. You're just sitting there. You can't eat. You're thirsty. You kind of have to pee, but you don't, you're like, maybe I can hold it for another hour. And you're afraid to like do something. Like you're just kind of sitting there waiting for something to happen. You're like, oh my God, I asked this question. What does this resident think of me? Oh God, I should have known how to read that fetal heart tracing. Oh my, like you're just in your head, and it gets progressively worse and worse and worse. So, that was kind of my headspace. And I very much felt the whole constantly scrutinized, but also simultaneously insignificant to the team. Because I just never got the feeling, I never felt like I had a hard time like feeling valued and feeling like I was adding something to the team. until we had this one patient. We had this one patient who she was primarily she was Spanish speaking only, and we lived in a community. Our hospital was in a community where we had a lot of primarily Spanish speaking patients. And this woman, she had 2 fetal demises, and this was her 3rd pregnancy. She was having a lot of she was having a lot of trouble with this pregnancy. That her baby was having a lot of like late decelerations. Baby wasn't doing so good. And like one time when she was, she's on the L&D floor, the labor and delivery floor, and her baby's heart rate goes down, and a bunch of people rush into the room. She's terrified, right? Because she's gone through just the ringer with her past 2 births. So she's like, of course she's worried about the worst possible scenario. We all kind of calm her down, and then everyone kind of goes back to doing what they have to do. It's a very busy floor. And I started when I was feeling constantly scrutinized and very insignificant and very just, I don't know what to do. I would just kind of, leave that space. Not leave. You let your residents know. So I would be like, okay, I'm just going to go check on, one of these patients. And so I checked on her every day for a while. And at first my Spanish was very rusty. At like the first one we went as a team, we'd go in with the interpreter and stuff. But I was like, you know what, like maybe what if I just went in by myself? Like I'll just try, So I go in with my really broken Spanish, and I just try to just talk to her, and like our conversations first are like, how's the food? She's like, food's not great. I'm like, yeah, I know, but what do you like to eat? And then we start talking about like her foods. I'd ask her about her foods, and she's like trying to describe to me like this really special dish in her home country. I tell her about my foods, and then I realize not only do I not have the vocabulary to describe my favorite Sri Lankan foods in Spanish, I don't even know how to describe them in English properly. Like it's just things, but it's like that shared joy of recognizing like there's certain experiences and feelings that it's hard to translate into words, but you get that vibe. You can capture that vibe, right? And so over the course of like the next couple of days, like I would just go and I would just chat with her, I would just talk to her, and like I wouldn't go in with an interpreter. I would just kind of wing it. I would do my best on my own, and it's just I got to know, like she would show me pictures of like her family, tell me about her cousins back home. And and then eventually like I got to meet her husband, and then like, her husband, I found out that her husband was in a band in Long Island, and he like played videos. He's like, yeah, see, like he recognized me. He's like, yeah. I was like, dude, your guys' band is really good. And then I really got to know her, and it felt like, and then on the last day of my last day of the rotation, and I was like going around and saying goodbye to all my patients. Because she and her husband were so musical, as kind of like a small goodbye, I sang like one of my favorite Spanish songs for them. It was just a really special moment. And I can only imagine how terrifying it was to be in a hospital where everyone's taking care of you, but they don't have the time, and the residents don't have the resources or the time to be able to like check in on everyone so much, and they're doing what they can to keep you alive. So understood, but she's in this place where she, it's not her first language. Her husband visits when he can, but she's alone for most of the day, just stuck with her and her feelings about her unborn baby, just hoping everything's okay. And so for me, be that relationship and being able to just talk to her and let her know that she wasn't alone. And for me, it was a really special relationship, because even though the experience of being a 3rd-year medical student always left me just riddled with doubt and, questions about what I was contributing, what could I contribute, the desire to want to contribute, but also not having that much medical knowledge yet. And like, just, you want to be, like you want to do so much, but you're learning, you're a little baby, you're a young Padawan, you just don't have those resources yet, but also feeling judged on that. So when all those feelings surfaced for me throughout 3rd year, going back to the idea to remind myself, well, like, okay, being a 3rd-year medical student is tough, but I know how to be a human, I know how to, be there for someone and try to make them feel a little bit less alone. And that's something that I can offer, right? And at the end of the day, like, that's what we're here to do. And that was something that I felt that that was something I felt like I could do. And I hope that, I hope that I was able to play a small part in helping her feel less alone, letting her know that she was loved very much, and that we really cared for her, and that, she was going to be a great mom. So that was my experience. That was something that was a really affirming experience for me. So despite overall kind of it being a very physically demanding, difficult rotation for me, the experience of being able to remember and reconnect with I think the heart of what we have to offer in medicine, even as third year medical students, even before we can make plans and we know pharmacokinetics and stuff like that, we know how to be humans. And that's something that kept me going throughout the year. The reminder of, I know how to be human. Being a med student is hard, but I can be human. So, yeah.
Arnie, thank you for sharing that. I think I can relate, and I think a lot of people can relate to the challenges of rotations, that kind of heightened sense of awareness, figuring out what your role is, what you can do to contribute. And I think what you just outlined is and a lot of this discussion has shown is that throughout training, there are a lot of sometimes explicit and then non-explicit messages that get thrown your way, whether it's assessments, feedback, tests, just different, they come in different forms that make you question, am I good enough for this? Am I cut out for this? And they take a toll when it's kind of coming in different ways, different forms and from all directions. And I think your story just really illustrates kind of a beautiful example of how you didn't let that make you forget that you do have something to offer and you can be a helpful, meaningful presence in that patient's life. So thank you for sharing that story, Arnie.
My pleasure.
And again, I would love to hear Lauren and Mohit's reflections on this, and then also kind of highlighting what things we really want to let everyone listening to this know what's helpful to persevere through these things.
I was going to say that thanks for sharing. I think it's a really common experience. I definitely had the same difficulty with the constant scrutiny. You're constantly being watched. And I think that can get really overwhelming, and trying to figure out how to show up as yourself and also meet the expectations for a third year med student can be really challenging. But I do wish that they did a better job of reminding us as students that you have the time as a student to sit down and talk to patients, and sometimes you'll get additional information that no one else knew about because you were able to sit there and talk to them. But also it's it can be really rewarding for you and the patient, because just like you mentioned, we will go in, the whole team will come in on rounds and be there for 10 minutes, and then they don't see anybody else until the next day except their nurse. And I think we don't really, medical education we don't do a good job of remembering that patients are people, and people don't want to just sit in a bed by themselves all day. And so finding ways to connect with people can be helpful, not only to them, but also to you.
Yeah, I think another thing, it's hard in the moment to recognize this or even remember this when you're getting scrutinized and assessed, but the system is set up to then compare each individual to each individual next to them. And I think hopefully our generation will change that. But that is not necessarily the best way to then assess your own self from the inside out. And recognize for yourself that your self-worth and your self-fulfillment and your self-potential is completely on a separate trajectory than whatever any assessment form says. Just as we always say that you are not your score on an exam, on an MCAT, on a step 1 or whatever, the exact same thing can be said about your written assessment in any rotation. And that you can derive your own self-worth separate from that. In terms of parting thoughts, I'm gonna copy this image link into the chat. I think this is a great visual representation of this whole Setbacks in Medicine series that we've created. is that we don't see. So if you can't click on the link, you're not able to. It's basically an image of a person juggling plates, climbing up stairs. He's at the top of the stairs. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Everyone sees this up front. The performer, the person who is juggling, doing 100% of the time, doing 100% of the work, doing it well, doing it perfectly. But what we don't see is those steps that brought them there and all the broken plates up until the point that they got to be a performer and be on stage in front of an audience. And I think that is a great analogy to how we are in medicine, that we often see attendings, we often see mentors, fellows, residents, whoever is maybe farther along in training than us, that they're doing a great job. And we ask ourselves, how can we get there? We'll never be able to get there. But you don't know all the steps and all the broken plates that they needed to get to that point until you talk to them.
Mohit, that was really powerful. Thank you for those, thank you for articulating that in that way and sharing that, that image. I'm just really struck by what you said. So thank you. Lauren and Arnie, any other, Lauren, I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I think that picture is great. It's such a good picture. I think it kind of goes back to what I was mentioning earlier, that like there's like this culture of like only show the good side of you, and that's really not who we are as people. And so I think like it's really important for us to show up as ourselves and acknowledge that like we are individual people who have individual things that we bring to the table, and that is a strength and not a weakness. Because if we have a team of, we're all working on teams, right? And if we have a team of everyone has the same strengths, then like there's so many things that are going to be missed. And so I think like, yeah, I love that image. I have not seen that before. So I think like parting words would be, do your best to just listen to your like inner self and your gut, because your gut's usually right. If you feel like someone is giving you feedback about something that doesn't resonate with how you view yourself, like it probably is based on whatever they're bringing to the table in this experience as well. It may not be a real reflection of who you are. And so I hope like my story kind of reminds people to like check in with people who know you if you feel like you can't really trust what you're thinking. And then also med school is really hard. Med school is really hard. Residency is hard. I cried at work like 2 weeks ago because I just got overwhelmed. And I took the opportunity just to, I'm in a group chat with all of my co-residents, and I was like, you know, I'm just going to tell everyone, like, I cried today. Work was really hard. It was really overwhelming. And there was a million things happening. And I didn't really know how to handle it. And I just got overwhelmed and cried. And then after I said that, most of my co-residents replied, I'm like, oh yeah, I cried like last week at work and I didn't feel like I could tell anybody, or like yesterday I went home and I was like really overwhelmed and I didn't really want to tell anybody. So just know that like, whatever you're experiencing, like good or overwhelming or like whatever you're experiencing, someone else is also experiencing that or has. So yeah, I guess that's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I think you just illustrated that you may be feeling alone, and then you share that, and then the whole group chat goes off. And so thank you for being here to help myself and a lot of other people not feel alone. Really appreciate you being here. Arnie, any other last parting thoughts?
Yeah, a couple of things. I think that, no, I agree with everything that's been said, but I think the one thing is that medicine kind of expects us to be superhuman, right? Like you're not allowed to like be sick. You're not allowed to have anxiety or stress, stigma within the psychiatry field, you know, towards providers when we ourselves may, you know, struggle with mental illness at times. These are all things that we need to work on. And there are many, I think there's many reasons why there has to be this like where there's this superhuman culture. But I think even though it feels like medicine expects you to be superhuman, I think what makes it beautiful is that we are human, right? We are we as humans have this privilege of caring for fellow humans. We work really hard to learn this knowledge to treat people, but we are also human. The same like barriers and difficulties and heartbreaks and weight of emotions that affects our patients affects us too. And so I think being human's really hard. Medicine or not, being human is just hard. But what makes it difficult to be human is also what makes it beautiful to practice medicine. And I think that no matter where you are in your training, no matter what challenges or setbacks you're facing, you always have something to offer. Even if you're like, my God, my step score, my rotation grade, whatever, this isn't this, this means this is some mark that says that I'm not cut out for this. Like, no, your experiences, who you are as a person, you are of value, not just in medicine, but in this world, just by virtue of being who you are. And even the moments where you feel like you are less than or not enough, those moments, if you can take them and harness them and let those light a fire within you and not let those define you, not let those crush you, you can then become a shining light for someone else. And you're going to be the light that gets someone else through that moment in their journey. So never forget that.
I think we have to leave it at that. Can't say that's just that right there. Thank you, Arnie. We are at the hour, so just want to send a huge thank you to Mohit, Warren, Arnie for being here, for your courage, for your vulnerability, and sharing these stories. Can't thank you enough, and I appreciate you all. And thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Take care.
Everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.